I think today's panel, this morning's panel, is we are going to try to connect industry with people, as David said, or smart living, or smart cities. So I think I'm hoping we have a panelist here with us, both from the industry side and a little bit like David, and we have a smart living side. So we are going to try to understand how industry can, or industry or industrial companies have to keep in mind how smart living or smart cities are evolving. Like Ford Motor Company is trying to understand, I think all of us need to understand that how our lives are changing, our surroundings are changing, and our interactions are changing, and so forth. With that, I would like, as you can see, we have 4 other panelists joining David, and I would like each of the panelists to take a couple of minutes, introduce themselves, and maybe make a comment, what you think your company can do to help improve our living. Maybe could I start over there with Greg, with you?
Good. Thank you, Andy. And by way of introducing our company, Bentley Systems, ARC ranks us as number 2 in engineering design tools for plants and infrastructure, and number 1 in asset reliability software. And in between there are all the opportunities for going digital we're talking about here. And I guess to introduce the subject in going digital and where we are now, I'd like to strenuously disagree, and you may notice this, it's strenuous, with at least one of the speakers yesterday who said there really isn't anything big that's going to happen and help you and advance fast. There is, and it's here this year, wasn't here last year. It's the ability to have a digital twin of your operating plants. And that's a connotation with a lot of promise and has certain requirements. It takes technologies together to meet those requirements, but those technologies are here. So you would say to have a digital twin, it needs to have reality. Your assets and plants are in 3D, and you might say we don't have 3D models. We could do laser scanning and have point clouds, but that's elaborate, sometimes lossy, and so forth. There's a technology now, reality modeling, which uses overlapping photographs to resolve into a reality mesh that's engineering ready and is and can be obtained for any operating plant. So, and that obtained with drones or other cameras. You can supplement with laser scanning. So you have the reality aspect of a digital twin. The next part is you'd expect the twin to have veracity, to help you understand and explain and simulate behaviors. That is the digital DNA that's in your engineering information. The problem with that is it's been dark data for you. When we talk here about AI and machine learning, unfortunately, your engineering information, which you bought and paid for, is in formats that are inscrutable other than to the application that created it. The solution to that is also here now from computer science. It's a hub approach where you can digitally align in a cloud service and maintain and synchronize the changes as they occur in your engineering information. And you might say, well, then that's digital. It has reality and veracity. Needs also integrity to be a twin. It needs to be up to date because your plant continues to change and your plant information continues to change. You can put that all together with change synchronization on the digital DNA from the engineering information. That's what the hub approach in a cloud service does. And then you need also the change synchronization from physical changes, and that's what continuous surveying can increasingly do. And then you can apply machine learning to that to recognize and classify the digital components that are the engineering information within the digital context of what you do. So having a digital twin is feasible and available. It's what we in Siemens have put together for as-operated plants in our plant site offering. And Eckhard Eberle, if he hadn't gotten the flu in India, would have talked about that yesterday in his presentation. It's now our plant site offering for your plants to add a cloud service for digital twins is in shakedown now with its early adopters. It will be available to you in next quarter. It doesn't replace or displace anything you have already, because when it's a digital twin, it's a reflection of, a mirroring of what your reality and physicality environments are. So it's very exciting, we think.
Okay, let's move on to Billy.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Billy Barden. I'm a Global Technology Director with Dow Chemical. For those that don't know Dow, we're one of the largest materials manufacturers in the plastics, polyethylene, silicones, and polyurethanes arenas. And so, what we make helps enable, you ask about how digital impacts the consumer and cities. What the materials that we make and the digital technologies we're applying all the way from our R&D capabilities through manufacturing, and then from our customer order all the way through product delivery, they enable many of the things that you touch every day. They help us develop new silicon chemistry, which helps with your sealants around your bathroom tubs. It helps us enable new polyurethane chemistry, which goes into your mattresses or into your refrigerator insulation and makes it more efficient. Also, new packaging capabilities, things that allow packaging to be more recyclable, more recoverable as we move towards a circular economy. Ultimately, digital helps enable those projects. We're not doing digital just for the sake of doing digital. We want to be able to connect better with our value chain partners, our customers, help enable using our materials into their end products. So ultimately, for us, it's about how we use the technology for generating additional chemistry, new novel materials to provide solutions for the problems that face the economy and society today.
Excellent. Steve?
Okay, I'm Steve Beamer. I'm working BP Upstream. I'm in charge of the digital transformation representative for the business. Is probably the easiest way to phrase that. And so, much as you heard in the opening comments, we're trying to make the lives of our employees better and pull them away from the hazards in the plant environment. So if people don't need to touch equipment, our vision is they shouldn't be where the hazard is. So we're trying to make their lives better by putting information in their hands, letting them do things onshore that we're doing offshore today, like planning work and reviewing things and inspecting things. As a company, we're focused on making people's lives better. We call it the dual challenge, right? There are things going on in the world where we're trying to move away from hydrocarbons into alternative energies and stop climate change and those kinds of things, but also giving, there's a third of the world that doesn't have basic needs in terms of power and energy. And when you bring energy into those places, the quality of life comes up. So we're trying to balance both things and look at, what's the future going to bring. And then part of my role is also to help us understand what's that going to do to the organization. If I can plan work onshore and I only want to put people who touch equipment offshore, how do I enable them to be able to operate and maintain? It's a different skill set, it's a different organization, and how do I prepare them for that? How do I put digital tools in their hands that will allow them to actually, be able to do those jobs? And as experience leaves the workforce, how do I enable the next generation to have the same experience, capture that in a digital way and present it to them? So those are the types of things we're focused on.
Excellent. Adebayo?
Good morning. My name is Adebayo Onibanjo, and I'm with GE Transportation. So traditionally focused on two businesses: build locomotives, service locomotives. And the digital side has just helped us help our customers, so the railroads, to increase their productivity. And the challenge they have is driven by all of us in this room, right? So we order from Amazon, we expect that package to arrive within an hour. And so for them, they have to figure out, how do I stay competitive? How do I make sure that I know where that railroad is? How do I make sure that that train doesn't go rogue? How do I make sure that I can, operate that in a very efficient manner? So a lot of the digital things that we do is really focused on ensuring that that train becomes digital in a way that I know what's going on with it. I can predict what's happening with it. I can anticipate what needs to get done, and then I can make the lives of the people that actually walk around that more efficient.
I think David made a point very well. It's all about aligning people at our companies, and I think I like the way you described it, David. And maybe if I could ask, perhaps if you could talk about if you have an initiative or some specific things that you are doing at your companies to obviously align everybody internally for this digital transformation that most of us are on this journey. I think that would be terrific. So let me maybe start with you, Steve. Anything BP is trying to do? How are you trying to align your company?
I really related to David's picture of the dog sled, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
I think we're in that space, right? Our executives have said we want a different company, we want to be digital, and so people have gone off and started things. But we've just done something similar to the picture that David showed. We've just stood up a digital organization, and we're trying to get common ways of prioritizing, get everything out on the table that people are working on, and get them lined up. It is a challenge, right? Because there's a lot of pent-up demand, I'll say, within BP, right? We sort of skipped a generation of upgrading systems and things, so there's a lot of things that people want to do, and it's understanding which one of those are going to get value. And there are big things that are going to take a long time, and they're going to take a long time, but there are also, what are the quick wins we can do to make people's lives easier, to get people excited about coming to work? So our most recent employee survey, they added a few new questions, and one of the questions was, do you like coming to work? And another question was something around, we're really working to make your life better. And those questions scored extremely low. So I think the executives are kind of waking up to, let's make this a better place to work, and how do we line people up to that?
Excellent, excellent. Billy?
Yeah, sure. So I think we can all relate to your picture. We started our journey for, I would say, organizational alignment a few years back already. Much like you, our new CEO, one of his key objectives coming in, Jim Fiddling, is to have a digitally oriented DAO, a digital DAO as he calls it. And so we have very strong alignment in the corporate suite, in the E-wing, or our executive wing, as well as amongst our business and division presidents. So we have very strong alignment at the top of the house, which is required if you're going to make any significant change. We have lots of, let's call it enthusiasm, at the bottom of the house. So our newer hires, our less experienced hires, they come with a predisposition that tools will be enabling for them, that they're going to have the capability to see data in the field, to be able to Google any answer that they need, to be able to download a procedure and watch it virtually or visually before they have to go do a task. That's a demand, that's what they expect. So one of the keys is channeling that demand in a way that aligns with our strategy. And then in the middle of the organization, you have what we call a clay layer, which is difficult sometimes to change and focused on internal politics, maybe more than probably external focus around customers and making DAO exactly what it needs to be. So the clay layer, you have to adapt. And what we like to say is that change happens one conversation at a time. So there's no way to enable or bring people along without talking to them, without showing the vision and strategy. So we have at the top of the company a digital DAO strategy, which impacts all businesses, all functions. That comes from our corporate offices. And then each of the individual areas had to align to that. But in addition, we've promulgated a new way of working between our IT, IS organization and our manufacturing and R&D organizations, such we have digital centers, which are driving new technology evaluation, new technology capability and development. They are not tasked to change the organization, but they're tasked to identify and pilot, prepare for promulgation and new technologies. So our digital centers are on the front end. And then we work very hard to align the long-term functional owners. So an IS organization or a manufacturing operations and procedural organization, to make sure they're ready to receive that technology. And then we have lots of conversations. So we've had our board of directors come through. We've had our senior executives come through. We've had multiple listening sessions. I've been the last 2 years around the world to most of our major sites. We have about 115, 120 manufacturing sites around the world. Town halls, just talking, communicating by web form, any way we could get the message out. We're working on that.
Well, that's excellent. David, do you at Ford Motor Company, do you have some initiatives going on to do that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do in our group is use actual proof of concepts instead of PowerPoint to get our messages across. So as you mentioned, there's that clay layer. It's no different than any other company. What we tend to do when we're not getting enough traction is we'll create a proof of concept, and we'll typically use the Raspberry Pi or Arduino type devices. Grant, there was some discussion yesterday in one of the sessions about the value of these devices to show off concepts. Sure, there's issues with scalability and so forth. However, they are powerful devices where you can rapidly prototype something, take it up to the right level. So for example, last year we had a technology we want to convey that would cause a lot of change to some of our standards that nobody wanted to really deal with. So we created some prototypes. We showed it to our chief technology officer, who almost jumped out of his seat, wrote 4 pages of notes, got really excited, and soon enough, there was a lot of momentum going on within Ford to get some policy changes going.
Excellent. Could we please show of hands with questions here? Do we have, get your questions ready? Yeah, please, and ARC folks, please, walk around. I think we have a great discussion going on. Please get your hands up so that we can bring Mike to you, especially related to how can industry, work with improving the lives, our lives. Okay, Greg, go ahead.
Well, although we're a software company and only a few thousand people compared to these other organizations, we think we've got to change a lot also in terms of our culture to hustle the benefits of digital twins out to all of you here. So we've done something unprecedented so far as we know. We've taken our web environment for the immersive visualization and the analytics visibility you can now apply to what otherwise was dark data in your plants, and we've made that open source. And so the point of the digital twin and its use cases are to support and improve and multiply the benefits you're getting from everything else you're doing and talking about here with augmented reality, with AI and machine learning, by opening up what was otherwise dark data, which we have been able to do. But to do that, we can't anticipate all the business and use cases, so we've made our source code, you can download it on GitHub and go about in the augmented reality journeys of your own and the machine learning and analytics capabilities, which you're very strong on, and just haven't been able to apply yet to the actual engineering substance of improving your plant throughput. So we've gone open source, and then inside our company we say inner source. The way in which we work together as colleagues in Bentley Systems has changed as well. So it's affecting all of us.
Yeah, good. Eddie Bayer, do you have some initiatives going on?
Yes, so I think everybody knows GE is, and I have colleagues from GE Digital here, so GE was very focused on making digital a big part of what we do. But I'll make it a bit more practical and bring it down to the team level. So one of the things that we really focused on was when we looked at the whole digital space and how we were building it, it seemed a bit very horizontal, right? So we had teams that had pretty much all the skill sets, right, to build something. And you know, in a team you'd have the UX, full stack, application guys, and we started looking at that, and it didn't seem like it made sense, right? So we had people that are kind of working on duplicate things, and the idea was to go in a very vertical approach, right? Where if you look at the whole IoT architecture, let's just make it very simple, right? So you have your end devices, protocols, your core, and the application. And so we structured the teams like that, where everybody became a consumer of the other, right? So the edge device guys knew that someone else was going to use the data that they were collecting. And so they had to think about how they were building it to make sure that the core guys could consume that data. And then the core guys also knew that, okay, this is how I need the data to come. This is the frequency at which I need the data to come. And in the end, the application guys also knew. And the reason this is important is because I think in David's slide, he spoke about the internet and not the intranet, right? And if you look around in this environment, or even if you go to the next door and see the exhibitors, there are multiple solutions that are going to be part of your final solution. And so whatever you build in-house, you have to build it with the notion that you're going to bring in something new. And so having a framework where the people that are working for you, what they're building, they expect someone else to use that data, and they expect to use someone else's data, right? So here, one of the things I really liked is the increase in the volume of people talking about cybersecurity, right? So we build onboard systems, offboard systems. Cybersecurity is something that I don't know that we can handle ourselves, right? But if you see solutions out there that make practical sense for you to embed into your system, because of the way you've built your team, the way you've architected it, it makes it easier for you to say, I like your cybersecurity onboard system for encryption of the video data I'm bringing on from the train, and you can easily integrate that. And I think that's the key lesson I think people should really focus on. Get your teams to understand that they're building for someone else to use it, and they should expect to use someone else's data. And I think that's where the biggest challenge is, because I don't think anything here, I mean, you talk to people and they're like, well, we used to do this. This is M2M. I've always collected this data. The difference is you only collected that data for just your own use case. In the future, someone else needs to use that data. And so you have to build it in a way that that's the expectation.
Excellent, excellent. I think we have a question here. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Matt Maladi from Reliance Industries Limited. It's great to see Steve Beamer on the stage, and we were colleagues. This is a question for Greg. Greg, I heard everything you said about dark data and engineering data and how it can be pulled out for better use and leveraging that data. Have you applied any of your systems in real day-to-day operations and maintenance? Not engineering or design, day-to-day activities.
Yes, and increasingly so at Reliance Industries and Jamnagar. You know, you would like to have a digital twin environment, however, to bring together what you're going to be doing in APM, for instance, in reliability-centered maintenance, so that it's in the context of the actual operations of the plant and is always change synchronized, and you can have, you know, it's not a twin if it's not current. So bringing these technologies together so you can have an evergreen digital twin is going to pay off in whatever the initiatives are. I think the use cases we heard yesterday, for instance, in operating plants, remote operations, for instance, to have the digital twin that has both the reality mesh that's engineering ready is going to be used daily in operations. So for sure it's going to be maintained up to date, but your engineers will be able to do what we call inspectioneering, because the surveying done in the plant, they won't have to put on their hard hat and go out to the plant. They'll be able to look at an immersive environment that looks increasingly the way all of you are providing with augmented reality devices and so forth. So going from remote operations, APM, and then although you're mainly talking about operations, that's what plant site caters for. When you have the digital twin, you're ready for the retrofit and the turnaround and so forth, and engineering to the actual reality in your plant and the reality of the engineering data as well.
Yeah, excellent. I think that I'd like to continue with that. If each of you could share a use case related to digital transformation, I think that would be terrific. Maybe, Billy, would you like to start that?
Yeah, sure. So I can give a couple of very brief examples. And when I talk about use case, I'm talking about enterprise-wide, not pilots, not small test cases. So in one of our businesses, we've deployed with a partner what we call enterprise manufacturing intelligences with Northwest Analytics. And we've deployed that several years back already, and what that does is enable a deeper level of visibility of the data. It goes well beyond just dashboarding and visibility of process data, but it incorporates inherently the knowledge of our operators and our most senior technicians and engineers. And we've deployed that across a big portion of our feedstocks fleets, and we've seen huge amount of value in terms of unplanned event reduction, improved safety, improved profitability, improved reliability with those tools. And that's well beyond a pilot. That's an enterprise-wide deployment. Another one that we've been working on very hard last year or two, you mentioned taking people out of harm's way and improving safety. We've been working on a program to eliminate confined space entries in Dow. I mentioned that when I was here last year as well. And for those my colleagues that are programmers in software, if you don't know what a confined space entry is, just imagine yourself about 3 or 4 inches tall and having to climb inside your hot water heater at home. It's nasty, it's dark, it's hot, it's full of water, which in a high enough concentration can be hazardous for you. That's not a place as a person you want to go. And so inside of our facilities, we have lots of areas where we have to inspect internally. You have to take the plant down, you have to plan appropriately and have environmental and safety inspections before you send someone in. So we're using drones and robotic capabilities to eliminate that work from a person, to be able to do that both with visual inspection and other sensor payloads that we're putting on those robotics. And you talk about just in the last 12 months, hundreds of thousands of hours of maintenance time that have been saved, tens of millions of dollars of savings in terms of unprevented or recovered operational time, as well as less time in terms of planning jobs. So we have some very strong evidence of how digital technologies can have impact at the enterprise level.
Excellent, excellent. Steve, GOG?
Yeah, I think in a similar vein, some of our biggest successes in digitization have been in the inspection area, right, with drones and robots. And, we have a lot of things underwater, so there's a lot of subsea equipment. And, we've moved, especially in the subsea space, we've moved away from divers and manned remote operated vehicles to basically autonomous. It used to be a thing about that's twice as big as these tables that somebody drove down and inspected a pipeline and you could get, a meter a minute out of it. And now we're doing it with autonomous little torpedoes that can do 3 meters a minute. And the machine learning actually flags things for the people to look at, so that people don't have to stand and stare at the screen and maybe forget what they're looking at and miss something. The machine doesn't miss anything. Another inspection use case where we've got a lot of value is in Alaska. We have a lot of pipelines running across the tundra, a lot of corrosion under insulation because it's very cold in the winter and very warm in the summer. And we fed all that data into the machine learning and took $50 million a year off our inspection program and have a much higher success rate. It told us stuff we were looking at for years, had never had a problem and never would, and told us go look somewhere else. And really got a lot of value out of that.
Excellent. Great. Adebayo?
Yeah, so I guess internally we drove the whole GE for GE, right? So try to use the digital to figure out how we build our products, develop roadmaps. But I'll give you a particular use case with one of the railroads in Australia. There is a tunnel that they typically approach 3 times a day. And that tunnel, the idea behind it is if your fluid levels, so it could be water, the fuel itself, any fluid temperature rises above a particular, temperature, the train will typically get stuck in that tunnel. And so what that means is that tunnel isn't accessible for any other railroad. The crew is constantly in danger. And by just understanding with digital, right, this is what the temperatures are saying. This is what's going on that train. With the solution we have where we partnered with SAS, we could do real-time event stream processing, analyzing that data, and then calculating if that train was going to stop in advance of the tunnel and enough time for that train to actually brake, stop, cool down, and then go on. And so it's very simple, but the fact that historically we had that data, there was no way to pull the data back from the train. There was no computing power to actually analyze and learn and calculate if that was going to happen. Now, this railroad just knows that tunnel is no longer a challenge, right? And it's simple things like that you start looking at the data that you collect, you start analyzing, you start playing with the data, and then understand, okay, what else can I change here? And I think that's one of the beauties of it, right? I don't know, especially, this is a legacy industry. It's been around for 100 years. Most people will tell you it's always walked this way. But I think like everything else, once you start measuring it and you have people that are smart enough to say, what else could I do here? You start getting interesting solutions. And so building a solution that with the event stream processing, the data is coming to you real time. You have analytics and data scientists that are looking at that data and saying, what if I change this parameter? What's going to happen? And that's just changing completely new behaviors. And people are believing it more because they can see that, wait, I just changed this yesterday, and this is the effect of what it is on my operation. And I think that's also helping us get through that hurdle of, oh, we've always done it like this.
Excellent, excellent. I think we have a question over here. Yeah.
Yeah, good morning. And I really appreciate the discussion we have around the human side of digital transformation here this morning. We're reading a lot and we're seeing a lot about companies and going through their journeys on this. But as we're pointing out this morning, the human aspect is critically important. While we're staffing up with new skill sets inside of our companies, we're adding people like data scientists, other disciplines that are coming in to help with this. From a human side, though, I'm also seeing stories of companies getting a little bit creative on who they bring in to help with the interfacing with the humans, bringing in sociologists on teams looking at trying to blend more efficiently the technology with the use cases for their employees. I wouldn't mind hearing from you guys on the panel. What are your companies doing in that space? Are you doing anything unique or special to help ensure you bridge that gap between the technology and the people?
Anyone like to take that? Yeah. Okay.
I can take a stab. We haven't started hiring sociologists or people like that, but increasingly when you read about what's possible with AI and ML, and you start realizing that there is the opportunity for those type of professions to come in and help you understand exactly how you change things. So it's interesting. I think it's going to eventually happen. I think there's a lot of data out there actually now about when you talk to younger kids about the career options they have, things like that are definitely getting more attention because I think, again, AI, if you keep reading about it, it's interesting that we've always felt that the barrier was they don't have the emotive type things that we humans have. But increasingly, as they learn, they're actually going to break that barrier. And, one of the best examples I've always gone to is, I don't know if you guys have ever watched AlphaGo, which is the whole, Google DeepMind training. And one of the first things they taught it out to play was a game a lot of us played, which was kind of like, I think it was Invaders. And the idea behind it is you have a slide and you move it left to right to try and break the brick above you. And, the first couple of times he did it, it was kind of very similar to humans. And by the 50th time, he had figured out that the best way to actually break the brick was drill a hole and then keep the ball at the top. And what that meant was he didn't bother about trying to break each one, just keep it at the top. And once it's at the top, you're going to drill all the way down. And so by the 60th game, it was setting records that nobody had ever been able to achieve as a human. And so increasingly, I keep telling people that, we're limited by what we know. And you're going into an environment where things are going to try out what we've never seen before. And so careers like that is definitely going to help us see things in a different light. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Greg?
Well, also as to this question of what's between the technology and the people and how does that change, just again from the software side, as we've introduced machine learning into what you can do with digital twins, I'm old school, and I thought that would mean that we would train the software to learn. And what has been actually the opposite. We deliver the reality modeling software, and then the user trains it. The user trains it what to classify and recognize, whether they're looking for hazards or emergency valves or whatever. And so this notion that there's a human who trains the software, and a lot of the quality of the software depends upon the quality of learning that comes from humans. And then so we have early adoption going on for this, and it's we found that there's been a lot more hesitation than I would have thought for people, because that's what we're talking about, to provide that learning that the software needs, but which is indispensably in the heads of people who will be retiring, need to pass this on to people who will come along and need to and expect as digital natives to experience in a cloud service things that don't need any training and so forth. The software needs the training.
Yeah. Billy? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. To answer the question specifically, we've done some targeted hiring in the social sciences arena, especially within our environmental health and safety organization, to look at how the impact of new tools and procedures work on behavioral capabilities of the employee base. from a skill set perspective, in our digital centers, we have there all the capabilities required to develop and deploy, which means we have hired classic areas we wouldn't normally hire within Dow: systems engineers, robotic engineers, that sort of background from a technology standpoint to augment our normal mechanical, process, chemical, and civil and electrical engineering base in the technology arenas.
David, yeah.
So I appreciate the question, and certainly Ford has looked at all kinds of different skill sets and degree types, which is important. For example, we've also looked at science fiction writers because they're the ones that have the far out ideas. And you can go to engineering and say, we're going to build a three-wheeled or two-wheeled vehicle or one-wheeled vehicle filled with hydrogen, and the engineer will look at you and say, what, are you crazy? But you bring in a science fiction writer, and the engineers will suddenly say, well, why did they design it that way? And that changes the whole paradigm to look at it in a different light. Another thing I would suggest is leverage the people you have. So we've hired a lot of data scientists who have never been in the plant. And so they look at the data, they see an anomaly, say it's a vibration of some sort, and they get all excited about, oh, the tool's about to wear out. Meanwhile, the person who's been running that line for 20 years knows that that vibration is the point in time where they're making the best quality parts they can get out of the machine. So leverage the cross-functional skills that you have as well.
Yeah. Excellent. I think we have a question over there. Go ahead, sir.
Mike Dedzik, ArcelorMittal Dofasco. Just on this theme of people here, you talked a little bit about it for all the panels there. As end-user companies like ours, moving forward on our digital transformation journey there, the key skills and competencies in data scientists, from very advanced to very broad here, are things we're all looking for here. From your team's perspectives, you've gone a little further there. Can you give some sense of what are all the data scientist skills and competencies you need? What do you want internally? What are you okay about using your trusted partners to bring in as data scientists skills? And any lessons learned for us early on in our digital transformation journey when it comes to the skills and competencies we need?
Who would like to tackle? It's a similar question. Maybe Billy, you want to take a shot?
I can start.
Yeah.
So first, let me say that the Advanced Manufacturing Institutes within the U.S., the ones that started under President Obama and the Advanced Manufacturing Office, all of them have a workforce development component. And specifically to digital, the DMDII, Digital Manufacturing Design Innovation Institute out of Chicago, has done a great piece of work on workforce skills for the digital age. It's available on their website, and we've used that model. We're a member of DMDII. It lists a number of skills. Data science is just one that's required for the digital age to really be effective inside the employee base. And within Dow, we've developed a community of data scientists. We have probably 500 or 600 data scientists that we would say are in that community. Some are part-time, some are professional data scientists. But they bring a different perspective than an engineer in terms of how they look at the data, how they analyze the data, the tools and capabilities that they bring to bear on a problem. But the fact is that we want all of our engineers, all of our hires, all of our PhD chemists, material scientists to be data scientists in the end. That's where we're headed. We want the employee base to all look at data and the value of that data that's coming off of our systems in a different light than what they might have done a generation ago. And so we've started programs with some of our key strategic universities around digital co-ops. So we bring in undergraduate students that have specific experiences both on campus and at our facilities that drive their digital education. We've also started doing graduate internships in this area, rotation assignment programs to develop these skills. So we're building internally a very broad way of educating and teaching our employees what we need to do. And we do utilize third-party partners when necessary to bring additional skill sets for a temporary time or a flux in activities as required.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so in our world, we've gone cautiously. We've hired some data scientists. We have brought some other skills in. As I see it, similar is we have a lot of engineers. We're an engineering company, so most of those engineers can do the basic data science stuff. We just need to teach them how. It's kind of a core skill set. And the data scientists complement the engineers because the engineers, we all were trained to do scientific method, right? I make a hypothesis, and then I try to prove or disprove it. The data scientists don't do that. They bring a completely different perspective, which complements. They say, give me all the data, don't tell me where it came from, and then I'll tell you where to go look. And so that's very helpful. I think the other things we've been doing with our partners is we've done some ecosystems, which I think is the future, right? You have to partner with your suppliers. You have to pick the people you're going to work with, and they need to be part of the team. You can't treat them in some of the contractual relationships we've worked in before. The other kind of skill sets that have really helped us open up are some of the innovation skill sets like design thinking, and we've had some of our partners have brought in artists and other things to help conceptualize it, and that's really enabled some of the teams.
Excellent. I think we have a question over there.
Yeah, I have a very selfish request to GE Transportation, but I think it fits with the theme of the conversation. I work in an office that's largely surrounded by active railroad tracks. And every morning, a good percentage of our staff has to make a decision. Do I take the shortcut over the railroad tracks to get to the office and save 5 minutes, or do I take the long way around where I know I won't get stuck? But 4 days a week, they're great. But 1 day a week, they get caught and they're stuck for 20 minutes waiting for the train. Would it be possible for GE to publish the location of all your trains, or work with customers, the railroad company, to publish the whereabouts and the trajectory of their trains so that our staff can know with an app whether there's going to be a train in front or not?
Okay, put you on the spot here.
Okay, good question. First, is it possible? Yes. The second question, are they going to do it? I mean, I think that's a question for the railroads. I think one of the things that's happened in the industry over the last couple of years is what we call positive train control. And so PTC actually allows us to know exactly where that train is to the track level and know what speed it's going at. And the design behind PTC is obviously to help protect the trains, right? So if a train goes above speed within a speed limit, we should be able to stop that train. Now, to your point, because that data is available now, it doesn't make sense for the railroads to open source that type of data for someone else to build an application that allows them to actually tell you, is that train going to cross, and should I do the 5-minute walk or wait? Yeah, it's practically possible. Will they do it? I mean, I think that's a railroad question.
Okay, good. I think we have a question over here.
Send us the data and we'll display it in our infotainment.
Thanks, Jane from Automaton. I have a question from Steve, but would also like to hear from the rest of the panel. Steve, you talked about the pent-up demand. There is no shortage of ideas for POCs. And in fact, yesterday, one of our partners said they started with 200 POCs and they got down to 20 or 15. So I wonder, sometimes when you open the floodgate, with funding, with opportunities to do that with both internal and external participants, what are your criteria for screening, prioritizing, and what are your criteria for promoting some of these POCs to the next stage?
Well, I think as we've heard in many of the discussions over the past few days, right, the trick is, and where we all have to, as big companies, where we have to move to is go fast. And so what we've been trying to do over the last 12 months is really kill POCs. We're not going to do a POC anymore, because what you find with a POC is you do an experiment, you get some good results, and then you can't scale it. So where we're trying to go is to minimum viable products, right? When we select somebody, we may go in. This is a bit of a challenge for our leadership as well, because they're still asking for the 100-day plan and show me the benefits, but we're trying to move to a more venture capital approach, right? I'm going to take a budget, I'm going to go work on an idea for 6 to 12 weeks, and I want a product out of it. If at that point it has value, we'll keep going. But we start thinking about scaling at the beginning of build it for everybody, build it to scale, how are we going to make this big? So that's where we're trying to move to, because the POCs aren't good for anybody. You get locked into you get some good results, and then you go back into the procurement cycle, and it takes you a year to get to a product, and then you can't scale it.
Okay. Anyone else like to comment? Okay. Okay, let's see if we have any other questions over there. Yeah, okay, we do have one over there.
Yeah, good morning. You're talking the ability to collect data is trending towards infinity, whether it's your data, your customer's data, or the ultimate end user's data. The cost of storing that data is trending towards zero. We read almost on a daily basis about data being compromised. So one thing I hadn't heard, I'd be curious your views on, where do you have legal and specifically ethical checkpoints on the data that you collect and how you mine it?
Okay. Anyone like to tackle all the data you are collecting? What are you doing? Where are the boundaries and so forth?
So I'm just
Go
going
ahead,
to put a caveat here. This is my view, right? And I think I asked one of the panels yesterday. We're in this position where people keep going, who owns the data? So I've been on both sides. I've been a service provider and I've been the consumer of the data. And the way I continue to think about it, forget the individual personal data. I don't think I need that data. But when you hear, a service provider say, well, we use the data for operations, to help you improve your service, but you own the data. The question I keep asking myself is, let's go back to the elevator example yesterday, right? So yes, you own the building, you own the data. I anticipate that in 10 years, the developer is going to show up and say, I don't even want to buy your elevator. Just provide an elevator within that building, and all I want is the residents and occupants of that building to be able to press a button, go up and down. You can determine how you want to bill me. And so in that instance, the developer doesn't own the data. And so I struggle with why we keep having that conversation today, because they made the purchase of that asset. In reality, I think David and I were talking about this before we got on. There's a value we put on this data that we say, well, it's my data. I mean, I bought the elevator, so I should have that data. And yes, you can use the data, right? And we see the same thing in the railroads, right? Our objective is to help you improve how you run your trains, right? And to help us do that, we need that data. Now, there are a lot of organizations that have the in-house capabilities to say, well, I also want to have that data for my team, and maybe they can come up with a solution, and that's absolutely fine. But the notion that we need to keep separating it, I think at some point in time that conversation is going to go away. Now, how do we protect the data? Again, it goes back to how you're consuming the data. You have to be transparent about what data you're actually pulling from the device. So if we provide you an onboard system, I have to be extremely clear that, well, you own, this is the data I need to be able to provide you a service algorithm, to be able to tell you when to stop that train before you get onto the tunnel so you can operate better. And the idea is, once I'm transparent about the type of data I'm collecting, I also have to be transparent with how am I collecting that data, how am I encrypting it, where am I storing that data. And so within our teams, we have an external cybersecurity team that does vulnerability testing when we build the code, where we store the data. All that stuff is checkboxes that the customer says they want to see. And that's absolutely fine in the age we're in today. But again, I keep wondering at what point in time that conversation is just going to go away, and there's going to be a railroad that just says, I want to be a railroad like a virtual network operator. You own the train. You do whatever you want to do with the data on that train. I just want to make sure that when Macy's tells me to move a box from A to B, I want that train to be there, and I want that box to move. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Well, slowly, I think every company needs to start thinking about business model. And obviously, David, you talked about business model. Ford certainly is looking at various business model. Maybe you want to comment?
Yeah, so data is extremely important at Ford, to the extent of when I'm using my own vehicle for an MVP, I have to sign a waiver because the VIN is considered PII. So we take it very seriously at all levels. But again, it's to the point that was already made. What is the value we're putting on the data, and how do we use the data in a way that we're not compromising people's privacy and security? For example, I talked about this in a previous session where we wanted to understand the sentiment in a confined space. And there's other companies that are doing this. I asked an intern to develop a MVP to demonstrate that we could listen to a conversation and rank it in terms of sentiment. Is the conversation happy? Is it sad? So forth. Right away, he was concerned about privacy, and I said to him, look, other people are doing this. They're going to release a product, and it may not have the privacy we want, and the masses are going to adopt it and not know any better. It's up to us to show that there are ways of doing these things in a private and secure manner. And with that, he went back and realized he could distort the sound. With machine learning, he could still understand the sentiment from that, give the result that we wanted, but also process this all at the edge. So none of the conversation was recorded. It was dropped off immediately, and even if they could tap into the device that was making the recording, it was unintelligible from the start. And so there are ways of protecting the data while also getting the benefit out of it that you're trying to achieve.
I think we have a question here.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. What a fantastic panel and information. Thank you very much. My name is Tim Butler with SANS Institute with cyber training. The question is, similar to the proof of concept, and you learned that a venture capital model, since your programs are very mature and robust, what lessons have you learned? What can you teach us? What is it about your program that's different now than it was 2-4 years ago? Whether you might think of them as mistakes or obstacles or challenges that are bigger than before. Can you just continue to share with us, piggybacking on your experience, what would we now do differently now than you might have done 2, 4, 5 years ago? That's the question. Thank you.
Go ahead, Steve. You want
I'll
to try?
start, I guess. I think we're still learning, and we're just trying to learn how to move fast. I think what we're doing differently now is we are trying to start agile, right? And my supply chain guys are not there yet, right? They're trying to figure out, how do I contract this stuff? How do I do that stuff? So we are trying to make sure that we're focused on things that are really going to bring value back. But what you find more and more in these digital exercises is that the value doesn't come from where you thought it was going to come from, right? You find out stuff you didn't know that may even add more value than you thought you had when you started it. So the lessons for us are we're trying to engage the organization in a much different way, right? I've got regions that got pent-up energy that want to go do stuff that's a pain point for them, but they don't recognize it's a pain point for others. So what we're trying to do now is connect them all together. So it's you're working on it, but you're not working on it for your facility, for your region. You're working on it for BP. And when you go work on it, if there's other people in other regions that are interested, we're going to let you work together. And part of it's giving up the control from the center. You have to actually let them go do it, but you have to give them the roadmap or the guidance of you're doing it for everybody. So that's where we're trying to go.
Greg, you have a comment?
Well, I heard yesterday this question of, do we have to know all the business cases before we invest in a technology? And I guess I'm hearing from this panel that you sort of have to approach in parallel with the types of technologies we're talking about and the potential of going digital. In the case of digital twins, there's the case of Shell, which on its biggest capital project at the moment has a construction digital twin, and Jake Leidick's going to talk about that at 2 o'clock in track 6. But since flying drones every week and now they're going to every day during construction, they have started to say, how else can we be using this digital twin in the same respect in which you're talking about? The data is useful to other constituencies. So they're saying flood resilience, we might have a flood during construction. Pedestrian simulation of the congestion on the site. What are some of the what-ifs that we could be thinking about now? And the timeline we can create, the time machine for our changes during construction, how can that be useful during operations and maintenance to go back and say how were things constructed and so forth? You wouldn't have started asking those questions if you hadn't begun with the minimum viable product of the construction digital twin, let us say. And I think there's more. That's sort of an example of what you're talking about.
Billy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I guess I would say a couple of our biggest learnings. One is don't underestimate the power of the support functions like procurement and the IS organization to slow things down. I mean, we have very good partners. We have very good partners, and we have dedicated resources now to help us push through some of our new technology. But the whole organization in general and the disposition to change, the inertia to change and turn a big ship is very challenging. So much more upfront change management with the supporting arena, supporting personnel that you're going to need. The other one is the access and the integration of the legacy data systems. It's much harder and much more difficult than I think anyone would have imagined going in. I mean, we have lots of data. Dow is a process company. We have lots of process data that floats around. But getting access to the enterprise data and having that in a usable fashion that's cleansed and has context, that's not easy. And for us, that's been a very big challenge. So spending more cycles on that and aligning that to a clear business value proposition would be a way to accelerate what we've done.
Very good comment. Did you have some? Yeah.
Excuse me. So yeah, I think the two ways I look at it. I think proof of concept has always been around. I think the Valley and startups kind of made us change the way we think about it. So if I look at it from my industry, it's an old industry. The most practical thing is you should still be solving a problem, right? You need to understand exactly what they're going through. Like, what is it that you're doing, and what is that POC or whatever it is going to be solving? The second part is it has to be an end-to-end solution, right? Usually what will happen in a scenario like ours, the challenge comes from mechanical. They're like, oh, we always have this problem with the train, it breaks down, blah, blah, blah. And you have to ask them and understand the whole value chain solution, because that's the only way it's going to scale and get implemented. If it sits within just mechanical, your champion will still keep pushing it, but then the rest of the business, because they were never part of that POC, don't see the value, and it's just going to stall. And so from the onset, as mechanical is indicating, oh, we have this challenge, your question is, okay, this is the type of data we think we'll be seeing. Who else uses this data? And so as you bring other people along that whole value chain into that POC, they should all have champion representatives. And so once you build out that solution, then there are other people immediately that are saying, wait, okay, I could totally see this, and this makes sense. So it's easier to kind of get into the whole solution.
Good, excellent. We just have a few minutes, and I would like to ask each of you actually maybe one kind of piece of advice or one comment that you could actually talk about. David, I would like to actually start with you. Ford is going through a big transformation, in business model in every which way. Perhaps what you have learned, something to avoid, a piece of advice for these folks?
Sure. So Ford is going through a large transformation internally, but also the entire industry is. There's a lot of change going on, a lot of disruption. I came from my own company prior to coming to Ford, and the reason I stopped doing my own thing and went to Ford is because Ford sees this as an opportunity, and they're hungry to go into that next iteration of what the auto industry is. So despite all the change that's out there and all of the turmoil that may seem to be opposition, think of it more as an opportunity. Disruption is not about a loss, it's about opportunity. So embrace it and learn where you can fit within it and leverage it to your greatest advantage.
Okay, excellent. Could I come this way, Billy? Could we? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I guess my advice would be to focus on the business opportunity. Don't worry so much about the technology, but think about where you want to go as a company or where you need to take your team. Stay true to that direction and your strategic intent, and then let the technology that help you get there be the ones that you choose. If you go around looking for a tool, looking for have a hammer and look for a nail everywhere, that's not a success scenario in my opinion. It has to have business value. It has to be aligned to where you want to go as a company. For us, it's productivity, reliability, customer experience, savings, and profitability, and safety. Those are the things that guide us, and whether it's digital technology or a new chemistry or new materials technology or a new catalyst to help us convert hydrocarbons or feedstocks more efficiently, it doesn't really matter to me. What matters is that we have a technology solution that enables a business value and a business strategy.
Steve?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's similar to what's already been said, and go engage your people, right? Get your people being part of the change, right? Because they have a lot of ideas and things, and there is pent-up frustration in your organization. Go find it and learn from it and give it some focus on your business problems.
I'll stay on the people theme as well. I think it's important to, get them to my industry. Again, there's a lot of folks that are domain expertise. I think we had it. Someone could be standing there, hear the vibration, and they could literally tell you what that means because it's been years. But then you're bringing in this new data scientists, developers that they don't really see it, and in their mind they want to work for Facebook rather than a train company. But getting them out there to actually visualize the solution that they're building, what it looks like for a crew guy wearing goggles and gloves to actually press a button in real time, and the difference of color mix and the tab size and those type of things, you just see it in their eyes, the excitement that, wow, I'm actually solving a really practical problem. I think it's really important, combining that domain expertise with this new young talent that's required to get us to that next level, taking them out there in the field, not just developers that are just stuck in the room and they have user stories, really getting them to see, like, this is the guy that's going to use that application, and this is what his environment looks like, this is what the condition looks like, when he has to actually be able to make that decision based on the application you just developed.
Greg?
Well, David's last slide had Henry Ford, and I think you may have had Henry Ford looking at a digital twin there. But what stays with me is think big and go bold in industry. For me, going digital, actually, I go back to a touchstone that means. It's not about gadgets and technologies. In digital, the result of one process is the beginning of another process, and you don't have to know how they're going to go together when you create them. You're just looking for the opportunities to connect and automate things. And as consumers, we find that happening all the time, and it's mainly happening to us, but we benefit from it in ways that you were talking about. In industry, let's think about industrially applying to get these benefits, the same notion of chaining and automating things together, but that necessarily means you have to be thinking beyond a single use case to the multiple constituencies that can benefit from something like digital twins.
Excellent. We have come to the end here, but I think a comment I want to make is, again, what I started with. I think it's a great opportunity for industry to improve the living, or smart living, like David put it, or smart cities. I think it is the way our lives are changing. It's a great opportunity for our industry to help improve the smart living, hopefully, of the future. With that, I'd like to end this session, and the refreshments should be in the next room, and we would like to see you back here in half an hour, 10:30 promptly. And please join me giving a hand to our panelists. Great discussion.